Hi, welcome to Mojo A Go-Go Writers Workshop, Dancing with the Elements. I am Marya Summers at Wholly Creative, and this is the first webinar in our series where we'll be looking at how we can dance with the elements, earth, water, fire, and air, to help us get new writing, better habits, deeper creativity, and a whole new groove in our writing life. As we focus on earth element today, we'll look at what that looks like in our lives, what it feels like, and how it manifests. We're going to look at how we can work with its energy in our lives and in our writing, which for writers is really the same thing, right? So settle back into your chair or to your seat. Let your back feel supported. Find a comfortable position in which you can really rest, so that you're really putting just minimal effort into receiving the information that you're getting today, and that both your feet are planted on the ground so that your legs are feeling supported. You feel planted. Maybe imagine some roots sprouting from your lower half, just really connecting you to the space where you're sitting and really feeling a part of things, so that you're not disembodied and disconnected, but really physically here in this space. Take a deep breath. Fill up your body, and as you exhale, let your shoulders melt down away from your ears. Let your belly soften. The body relax. Now take a relaxed breath in, filling the belly first. Let it float with the breath. Then the ribs expand, the chest rises. And exhale, the body softens and relaxes. As you inhale this next time, gently let the belly float up again. The bottom ribs expand, then the chest. And maybe this time subtly broadening through the collarbones like a smile. Pause a time for just a little rest at the top of that inhale. And then feel the energy circulate through you as you hold the breath, and then just gently let it go again. Slowly exhale. Let the breath roll out, the body relaxing with the exhale. Maybe gently pulling the belly button toward the spine to help empty the lungs. And pause for a moment at the bottom of the exhale, a moment of stillness, and then inhale again from the belly, the navel floating up, ribs, chest, collarbones. Pause and gently exhale. As you start in this relaxed, receptive state, you connect with the earth's energy, supported, stable, and still. When you're firmly rooted in this energy, you stand in the truth of who you are, in your identity as a writer. And you're able to get your best work because your mind is clear, like a pool of water. It's unagitated, nothing stirred up that would muddy or obscure your vision or inhibit the flow of creativity. And because you feel supported, you're not distracted by worry or any kinds of concerns in the world. You are open, relaxed, and aware. And you're ready to be witness to new experiences and receive new information. We'll be looking at earth element today. And I put together a little slideshow because I find that it helps to ground me in visuals, that I'm able to connect with the feeling of earth, the cool grass, the rough bark of the trees, the dappling of the sunlight through the leaves, right? Just looking at the picture, I can reconnect with an experience I had in the past, and I can bring it to mind in the present so that I really know, oh, earth element, that sense of calmness, of connection, of relaxation. So earth element is found in land, so terra firma, in rocks, crystals, dirt, plants, food, land animals, and the material world. When I want to connect with earth energy, for instance, if I'm feeling very scattered or it often is helpful to physically connect with earth element by taking a walk in nature, whether it's in a wild space like a forest or a field, or even in a tamed one like a backyard or a garden or a park. So any of these are fine ways to do it, but you might experiment with how these energies are different. And is it enough just to spend time in the backyard gardening, or do you really need time in the untamed wild nature? So these are things to start paying attention to, how these feel for you, and how these different feeling states actually affect your ability to be creative. I actually suggest going barefoot when it's safe and possible to do so. So often we are wearing shoes and it's really insulating us from a genuine experience of earth energy. So I suggest trying to, taking your shoes off, pressing your bare feet against the ground and feeling it beneath you, imagining you're rooting down like a tree, really claiming your space, tapping into the support of the ground and all the enriching nutrients that are there. You might even place your hands against a big rock or lay your face on a cliff's face or lean into a tree. Any way that you get this intimacy with the earth so that you really experience its solidity and stillness is going to be the most effective. Of course, if you're stuck in an office and all you have is your imagination, the imagination is a powerful thing, but go back and evoke these sensory experiences. Pulled out of off center, I have a tree that I like to sit in. I think of it as my tree, and sitting in its branches, I get this sense that I'm truly connected to my Mother Earth. I feel held and nurtured. So you can experiment how with the energy of each of these is a little different. You can also bring earth element with you. So bringing it indoors in the form of bringing wood, furniture, and flooring, crystals, potted plants, rocks, cut flowers even into your home or your creative space. As you know, I suggested last week that you create an altar and have earth element on there. You saw that represented in the flower or the plant that you were placing there on your altar. Another way to bring earth energy with you is to wear those things, to wear stones or crystals or gems or wood jewelry, or maybe tucking a flower into your hair or your lapel. You'll notice that lots of times people are bringing their pets with them places, and this is also a need to connect to earth energy. At the most basic level, anything in the material world is earth energy. So anything that is solid and in the material world is a grounding element, including food. So sometimes people are overeating because it is demonstrative of a desire to feel more grounded and more connected. As a result, it's very calming. So people will have that tendency to overeat. And the material world, many people are dismissive of the material world as something that is, it's not spiritual, that we should reject the material world or put it beneath matters or concerns that are spiritual. But our bodies are material, right? There is a mind, body, spirit connection. And if we don't care for our bodies, for instance, we might become depressed or ill. So the material world is important. And as I go through the workshop, you'll see that where that connection lies with the material world and how important it is to truly be connected with our experience of Earth, and not to minimize its importance in our spiritual and creative journeys. Darkness and night belong to the realm of Earth element. According to many creation myths around the globe, among them are the Chinese, Greek, Judeo-Christian, Egyptian, Norse. There are others. Those are the ones that are the forefront of my mind. But these myths all begin with darkness. So before anything was created, according to these mythologies, all there was chaos and darkness. So if you think of Earth element as the manifest world, then we go back to the time before things are created, there's this darkness. In the Egyptian myth, I'm going to look at the Egyptian myth and the Norse myth really quickly, because they directly relate to our writing process in a way that is illuminating, which is ironic because we're talking about the darkness, but it's illuminating, and it metaphorically moves us forward in our writing in a way that I find is very powerful. In the Egyptian myth, before there was form, there was only formlessness, and nothing existed except for chaos and endless black waters. And then a small, solid, pyramid-shaped piece of land started coming forth from the chaos and the darkness. So we start to see some solidity forming in this formless chaos. And then a god was born. His name was Atum, and it means both everything and nothing. Or as one Egyptologist called it, the all in its condition of not yet. So if we think about the all in the condition of the not yet, that's very much like our creativity, right? Before we create something, we have these ideas and they're limitless, but we haven't written them yet. So it is the all in the condition of the not yet. What's interesting is this god, Atum, was both male and female, and released the male seed of life into his female hand. And from this, everything else in the world was created. So when we look at this, creativity is calling on both our masculine and our feminine aspects. They're not actually gendered in reality, but we have ascribed these qualities of masculine and feminine to them. In the Norse myth, it starts very much the same. Before there was anything, there was only a gaping abyss. It was a chaos of silence and darkness. And it lay between two worlds, one of fire and one of ice. And as these two worlds of fire and ice began to creep toward each other, the fire melted the ice, and the drops formed themselves into Ymir, who was the first of these godlike giants. He was both male and female, and he reproduced asexually. Actually, he sweated, as he sweated, the world was eventually formed from these drops of sweat. So again, we see this, the asexuality, or this idea of both male and female I shouldn't say asexual, but both male and female, so a hermaphroditic sort of aspect to creativity. So it asks us to be all things in many ways, both working from our masculine and feminine, and to be very much in balance. But in both cases, it started with darkness. Darkness is important to the creative process for two reasons. One, because it's from darkness that creation emerges. And two, because in darkness, we rest and rejuvenate. So darkness is an essential part of creative process. However, there's often a rejection of darkness. Culturally, especially in a culture like ours, in the Judeo-Christian culture, the mythology, the god is associated with the light. So the idea is that we bring things into the light, and this equals truth and goodness, and then darkness equals evil and lies, right? Falsehood. So we start to create that division, this polarity of good and evil within light and dark. And that doesn't actually exist, right? We need the darkness as a time to sleep. And then we wake in the daylight, right? That's part of our biorhythms. So the darkness is not actually evil. It would be horrible. Like one of the ways they torture people is to put them in cells with lights on all the time, right? So honoring the darkness, and when we're in the darkness, being willing to perhaps be uncomfortable, because that's the other thing. So one, there's often a cultural rejection of darkness, but two, there's often, and this is natural, a physical aversion to darkness. It's very primitive, and it has to do with our survival. We can't see in the darkness, right? We don't see very well. It makes us vulnerable. It's difficult to protect us if we can't see what might be dangerous, right? And so darkness becomes the realm of the unknown. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's also in the darkness that our imagination awakens. When we're not limited to the actual physical world, we start to imagine beyond what's manifested already. And so in many ways, we need the darkness not only to rest and rejuvenate, but to imagine and create. Make sense? Okay. I would say that one of the reasons that I find, and I see it over and over again, that writers resist the writing process is this natural aversion to darkness. Creation is scary. We don't know where we're going. And for a lot of people, that can trigger some very deep-seated fears. There are many of us who it was not safe as children if we did not know the answer. We might have needed to be able to predict, constantly be in an alertness and having to predict the behavior of others, and knowing became the way we created safety. And this is a natural thing that we do, but some of us may have been more finely tuned to using knowledge as a way of creating safety. So if this is resonating with you, you might jot that down, because it turns out if we detach from our willingness to go into the darkness and to be willing to not know, we detach from a part of us that is really important and is very powerful and necessary in the creative process. You might just take a moment and jot down what your relationship to darkness is. And if you notice anything or you have any questions as I go through this, please do just pop them in the chat bar there, because I want to both acknowledge them and honor them as part of this workshop. And I also want to answer anything that I may not have clarified. So earth element also governs boundaries and organization. And as we did our intro call, many of us identified as not being ruled by earth element, not having a lot of energy or natural affinity to earth element. I find that this is usually the case, that earth element is the place where a lot of creative people are lacking. So just as we saw in the creation myths, something had to emerge as distinct, right? When that little piece of land popped out of the chaos in the Egyptian myth, or when Ymir the giant was formed out of the sizzling drops of water that were formed when the fire melted the ice. So in both cases, something had to emerge as distinct from the chaos in order for everything else to come into existence. So this distinction, this distinctness, means that Earth moves us metaphorically into the realm of boundaries, such as, right, we see that river in that one picture, and the river is defined by the earth. It's not defined by the water. So if I put the water into a round shape, suddenly it becomes a pool or a pond or a lake, right? And so in many ways, the water itself takes its identity from what the earth, the way the earth is binding it, or the boundary that is created by it. Boundaries are also seen in divisions between things such as day and night. And I'll go back to the myth again. And one of the reasons that I love creation myth is that I find that in many of the creation myths, that it points toward creative process in general, not just the creation of the world. And in the Judeo-Christian myth, the very first thing that God did was create light, right? He said, "Let there be light." And he separated the light from the darkness and named them day and night. And it was only after he established this boundary that the creation process, which took 7 days, could be measured. Okay, so light had to be formed. That boundary between day and night had to be formed before he could start measuring what he was doing. And according to the biblical story, God took that division of days, and on each day, he accomplished a given task. He also called it good, right? So as we are the gods of our own creation, like when you should be the god of your own creation, really. Step into that role of creator. You are powerful. In order to do this, you will also need to work with boundaries. You have to set aside certain times for certain activities. And you also should set specific goals, just like God in the Judeo-Christian myth. Like, today I think I'll, separate the land from the water, right? So knowing exactly what you're going to get done within a given amount of time, the boundary of time and days, is very helpful. Also know if the day is the time that you're working, the night is the time that you're taking time off. So rest is really important as well. Boundaries and organization also relate to your workspace. You need to have a space dedicated to your writing. And whether this space is a binder or a box or a desk, right? We don't all have the same financial means. Everything for each person is going to be a little different. But you need to have a space that's set aside just for your writing. And the more you write, the more you will need to have some system of organization for your work. Okay. We also see moving into form and structure. Okay, and before I go into that, I just want to acknowledge what some people have said about the darkness. Stephanie says darkness for her is fear and excitement. And there's some real wisdom in that, in what Stephanie's expressing here. Because if you take a moment and just feel fear in your body, like see if you can connect with what it feels like to be afraid. Like your heart races a little bit, or maybe a lot, depending on how afraid you are. Your blood pressure goes up, your muscles are on alert, right? You're ready to run, so that fight or flight is about to kick in. But so there's like some muscular tension. Think of your eyes go wide to take in what's going on, so that you're ready. Excitement is its next door neighbor. Like in the body, fear and excitement are very, very much the same. And one of the things I was taught when I perform or when I do a reading is to reinterpret my fear, because I'm not actually being chased by a tiger. There's nothing really threatening my survival. So it's okay for me to reinterpret this fear in a way that's useful as excitement, right? If there's a tiger chasing you, and you want to reinterpret that as excitement, that may end up costing you your life. But in the case of creativity or stepping into the stage to perform, which is another form of creativity, looking at that as, oh, hey, I'm feeling some fear. Oh, and just going to the body and acknowledging and experiencing those sensations, and then allowing us to construe those feelings as something that is more pleasurable, like excitement. So that is one really wonderful way to work with fear of the darkness. Kathy says, darkness is like losing twice, once for yourself because you can't see where you're going, and once for the recipient. Yeah. So for the recipient to be in the darkness, you mean by not receiving? Is that what you're expressing, Kathy, is by not receiving what it is you have to share? That's what I'm taking away from that. If there's something, other idea that you're expressing, please correct me. But the idea is, if it's dark, right, that the reader can't see either, because we haven't shared our truth or the thing that we've realized, right, in the light of consciousness. So as we look at creation, at Genesis, right, as boundaries and organization are established, we start to move into form and structure. These do not sound sexy at all when I say, oh, you need to work with some structure. When I say this to my students at the college and I talk to them about their essays, I kind of hear everyone groan. But structure is a necessary part of creating. And so I really honored structure. And I've thought of it, I try to think of it instead of, so you can think of boundaries and structure as things that hold you in and restrict you, which is absolutely one way to look at it. But the other side of this is they create safety and they create scaffolding on which to build. They're very necessary. Without them, you can't do very much. And so really just changing our relationship with these ideas is very empowering. In vertebrate animals, for instance, we have a skeletal system, a nervous system, a circulatory system, an immune system, a digestive system. Right? Those are a lot of systems in place. You get the point. in order for us to thrive. So the more complex something gets, we're complex organisms, we got a lot of systems going on. We got a lot of forms and structures in place in order to allow us to operate in a healthy way that is allows us to move around the world. So the more complex a project is, the more form and structure it's going to need. But even plants and invertebrates, which are simpler structures, do have structures and systems. The same is true for non-living matter. For instance, like granite differs from quartzite, which is marble. So granite and marble, both things people use for their countertops, right? They are different in that granite is igneous rock, which is formed by sediment, and marble is quartzite, which is formed of crystals. So even though they seem very similar, their structure is actually very different. And it's with these structures that each one of them are formed, right? So what else? Even atoms, tiny, like things that we can't even see have structure. So when we're writing, whatever we're writing, whether it's something teeny tiny or a larger project like a book, we're going to need to acknowledge both form and structure in order to get going. If we're writing, like a form could apply to a stanza and a paragraph, right? They look very similar. So, but a paragraph is to prose slightly different, and that is what discerns or distinguishes poetry from prose. Likewise, like when we form words, they might be comprised of the same letters. For instance, the word deer and read are comprised of the same letters, but it's the ordering of them that changes what they mean, right? And the separations between things like thin king and thinking as one word are, so even though it's the exact same letters in the exact same order, it changes by where we put those divisions and boundaries in the form and structure, right? So you might just jot down here, because this, I think, will be helpful for you right now, to just jot down what forms your writing might take. So lots of times we get stuck. I'm just writing poems. But what forms might your writing take? What forms might it also take? So some possible options are, hey, look, I have a slideshow. This is all written. And it actually helped me move toward my book, because as I went and found images, I started connecting to the feeling self with each image. And it started awakening ideas in me, because I was pulling it out of the ether, right? Oh, I have this idea about Earth, and I know how I feel it, but how do I communicate this to others? And so I started grabbing images that visually represented what I was talking about, but I also felt like there's a feeling state connected to each of the images that I chose. And as I chose them, I started writing about them. And so what I started to recognize is, oh, I'm writing a book. I'm not just writing a webinar. This is a book. So I have for each slide, I developed that idea further. So webinars require writing blogs, poems, spoken poems, spoken word, printed poems. You might also write a play, article, an essay, a story. a letter, right? Like an epistolary kind of writing, or even a text message, a Facebook post. These are all forms that your writing might take. Just think about what it is that you have been saying or expressing, how else it might take form. So manifestation and embodiment are part of earth element. Basically, anything that exists in the physical realm, anything that is solid and tangible that we can experience with our five senses, owes itself to the earth element. It's part of earth. The fact that we have a physical body, that we're born, that we grow, that we die, it's all the part of us that is tied to earth element. So everything that is in the gross world as opposed to the subtle world is earth element. I talked a little bit earlier about many people's, I frequently hear people say, oh, nothing in this world is actually real. It's all an illusion. And the illusory nature of existence and of being manifest. And I have found, like, I've talked to people like this, and oftentimes they have this, they're moving through the world in a very disembodied way where they don't feel like they have a lot of agency. Agency meaning ability to change the world or their lives, because they're just kind of detached from it. So this idea that this is part of the miracle, people. Like, the fact that we have a body, we won the lottery. There's a lot of people who don't exist. They weren't born. Their parents didn't become parents, right? And so the idea that we're even here at all is part of the miracle. And it's part of what our writing should capture, right? That we want to pay attention to the five senses, that we want to be reverent for the beauty that is the difficult parts, even the parts that hurt, are part of the beauty. Right? I hear people say it's better to feel pain than nothing at all. Right? So that idea that we really want to be at home in the body and in the senses. And I loved this image because manifest actually has to do, if you look at the etymology of the word, has to do with what we bring into the world with our hands. So there's this idea of making involved. And I love that picture of the little person as a seed and growing, because in some ways, if we're new writers, we're planting the seeds of our identity, and they may just be sprouting. And as you know, sprouts don't start above the earth, they start in the ground, in the earth where we can't see them. And so lots of times we're so attached to the fruit of our labor that we even planting the seed, right? That idea, putting it in the ground and letting it rest in the earth. And then even the sprouting that happens before we even see it push through the earth. So that honoring all parts of the creative process, not just the part where we're done editing, we're polished, and we published, right? Lots of times we get so attached to that. So even the research phase, even the phase where you're sitting in meditation, all of that's part of the creative process, and it's part of manifestation. Let me go back to that previous slide really quickly. You will see on the Ning website that there is an exercise that is called Small Stones. It's a writing meditation. And a small stone asks you to really just drink in the present moment and write a kind of a word picture, a very short word picture. So it's relatively small. That's what makes it a small stone. So it's not a long piece of writing. It's just like a snapshot of a moment that really draws on the senses in order to express it. I suggest as we go through this workshop that you start collecting small stones, that you start setting aside time to do that. Whether, for instance, I picked up a small stone, and I say picked up with air quotes. I wrote a small stone and placed it on my altar as an offering instead of picking a flower today, because I did not have a flower to go get. I didn't have time to go for a walk and grab a flower. So my offering to my altar was a small stone. So I said, you know what, here, creativity, I am grounded in this gift of this small stone, and I offer it up. So if you would, please share the small stones as you write them. Don't get attached to how good they are or how much better other people's are. Each stone creates part of a structure, creates part of a building, right? Great Wall of China was built one stone at a time. So make sure that you're taking time to honor, and you might even carry a little journal with you as we go through the next 8 weeks, just capturing small stones, maybe as you're I am sitting there writing something. So just taking these little moments to capture the moment and step into our identities again as writers. So Maslow's hierarchy, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but I want most of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy already. So if you're like, yeah, I know it, then good, that's great. But lots of times you'll see that we tend to now, the fact that we're all in this webinar tells me that probably our basic needs are already met. But oftentimes we detach from our creativity because there are other things that seem more important. Okay, so the idea like feeding our family, going to work is more important. And I would agree with you on that, right, feeding your family and feeding yourself do come first. But lots of times the shape of people's lives has room to be changed so that there aren't so many demands, right? So it might involve, hey, do I need to reduce my expenses, for instance, so I don't have to work so many jobs? Or do I need to think smaller in some ways so that my actual physiological needs are less? Right? I have a huge mansion and it's costing me all this money. Maybe I need to downsize so that I can really feel safe and have the mental energy and time to focus on my creativity. So the body naturally prioritizes your basic needs first, okay? But what happens is this. So if you are always on the go, trying to get things done, going to work to take care of those basic physiological needs, right? Trying to participate in your family and the demands of a spouse or children. If you have a lot of emotional issues that you need to work on, so that emotional stability, freedom of fear, like if you're down in the bottom part of that and there's a lot of demand and it's taking a lot of your time and attention, you're frequently going to be stuck in a kind of flight or fight response. So in your nervous system, you're very much in a stressed out situation. And the body's natural system doesn't allow for creativity in that stressed out state. So it's very, very hard to create when you're anxious, is what I'm trying to say in the short version of that. Meditation is one way that we can ground ourselves and calm our nervous system so that we can better get into a space where we're able to be creative. But you should not be meditating, obviously, if there's a tiger chasing you. Like, not time for meditation. So if Maslow's hierarchy, if your basic needs are not being taken care of, know that part of your creative challenge may be that you're going to need to reorder things so that you can reduce the demands of those things. However, like I see at the top of this pyramid, we have self-actualization, creativity, and fulfillment. But if you've ever had all your basic needs taken care of and you haven't been creative, right? You're not stepping into your creativity. It very much threatens your life. You feel like you're dead inside, or you feel like you want to die, right? So just acknowledging that this isn't something we should just put off to later. It is very much something that needs to be tended to. And so if we can reorder our lives or make, the imprint of our physiological needs smaller, then oftentimes it is conducive to us being able to focus on our creativity. Rhythm falls into earth element. So an awareness of biorhythms can absolutely So one thing I want to bring your attention to is the ultradian rhythm, which is ultradian just means rhythms that happen within the course of a day. And one of the things that was discovered by Nathan Kleitman, who was a groundbreaking sleep researcher, was that there's a basic rest activity cycle. And he identified this cycle actually within the sleep pattern. The night, there's that 5 stages of sleep that a sleeper goes through. But he found after he discovered it in the sleep pattern, it also applies to our waking life, that we go through 90 minutes of intense focus and high productivity, and then we need to rest for 20 minutes. So after that period of rest, we start focusing again, and then we'll achieve our peak, right? You figure at like 45 minutes, we're just totally nailing it. And then we start to taper off again. So according to this ultradian rhythm, the best durations of focus are no longer than 90 minutes. And psychologist Anders Ericsson did a study of violin prodigies, and he found that all the top performers had the same practice characteristics. 1, they practiced in the morning. 2 was that they did 3 sessions of practice. 3, each session was 90 minutes or less. And 4 was they took breaks between each of those sessions. So I will send you this information. You don't need to write it down, but these are important things to note. You should not just sit down and just start beating yourself into like, oh, I need to get 3 hours of writing done. Honor the natural rhythm of your body. Realize 90 minutes is all you got. And then you're going to hit a lull. So 60 minutes, 90 minutes, those are good periods of time, and then a 20-minute break. And they're actually, what they've shown is that, your cells regenerate and repair during that 20 minutes of break that you give yourself. So the rest time allows these housekeeping cells to integrate the processes of mind and body. So there is this mind-body connection that we need to honor while those cells are healing and replenishing. Okay, if you override these 90 minutes, and you can absolutely override it, the body has built-in overrides because sometimes we are in peril and we need to go longer than 90 minutes. But if you do that, you will get stuck. You it's not guaranteed, but there is the risk that you will get stuck in a stress response. And they actually have a name for it. It's ultradian stress syndrome. So it's a very real thing where people get stuck in like a stress response to this. Tribe is another aspect of Earth Element, and the webinar is going to go probably another 10 minutes or so. So if you can hang out for another 10 minutes, that's great. If you're on a schedule, know that this is all recorded and you can come back to this. But we're almost done, but it'll probably be about another 10 minutes. So our tribe, much like Earth and the gravity that holds us here, is our support. It keeps us connected. It reassures us, it nurtures us, and it's essential to us as writers. Here you see a picture of this is the group that I meet with once a month on Saturday mornings. I teach an hour of yoga, and then we sit and write together for an hour under these gorgeous eucalyptus trees here in Long Beach. You know, compared to other people, writers are weird. But when we're among a tribe, suddenly we are reassured that we're normal and that other people are experiencing what we're experiencing. It's important for us to find our tribe. And so lots of times if we hit a lull or we're not writing as much as we'd like to, I find for myself, and I see in others, that frequently people have fallen out of touch with their tribe, right, with other writers. And it's not only important for us to find our people, like for instance, we found each other here in this workshop, but it's important to show up both as contributing writers to our tribe, and as readers and audience for others. So we both need to hear and to be heard, right? So this idea that we serve as witnesses for each other, but that we also, by stepping into our role as writers, by embracing whatever resistance or fear we have, we step into these leadership roles and we allow others to see in us their own creative process. I was in a writer's group with my friend Tisha, and I watched her create a young adult novel out of nothing. Like each week she would come with some writing, and it was full of problems and it wasn't quite working. And each week she'd show up with new writing, and she would read it. And I was so impressed by her willingness to share what was clearly raw and unpolished writing. And I recognized in myself that I wasn't willing to do that. Like I was really scared to show up with writing that didn't reflect well on myself. And I watched her over the months start to polish and start to build. And by the end, she's out shopping her novel around with agents right now and working on a second one. And it was really inspiring to me, her willingness to show up just as she was in that moment with brand new baby writing. So don't hold yourself back because you think you might not be ready or you think you might not be good enough, because just in the courage that you show and your willingness to show up and be right where you are a leader. And it's so important. And I sometimes think that we forget to honor how important that is, or we haven't seen how important that is because maybe we haven't yet belonged to a tribe and seen others lead from their weaknesses, right? And a willingness to say, hey, I'm just starting out again. It's important to note that we probably also belong to tribes of non-writers, so that, right, we belong to more than one tribe. And if we have our tribe of writers, that's great. But we probably also have other tribes in the forms of our families and our coworkers whose needs and interests might actually pull us away from our writing. So if that sounds familiar, to you. Can I get an amen? Right? This idea that, you know, we don't just belong to one tribe. We don't all have these same interests, and that these people in the other tribes may actually sabotage our writing because it takes us away from what they want and need, right? So one of the things I try to do, or I have seen is helpful, if I can show up in those communities in my identity as a writer in a way that benefits them too, right? Suddenly my role as a writer is beneficial to that tribe as well. So some ways this might look like, oh, I'm the writer in the family, and so I can write the blessings at the holiday meals, or I can write the poems for these particular celebrations, or I can be the family historian, or whatever that you are writing. So however you can connect to your role in that tribe, in your identity as a writer, I find is very helpful. It doesn't mean that you should always be in service or only honor your writing when it is in service to others, but it's definitely super important, right? It helps other people to go, oh yeah, I see why that writing stuff is important. Like, it's helpful for all of us. And if they're not seeing it, you might remind them of that gently and nicely. Because Earth is still, that is why it has its solidness, right? Nothing stops moving. So stillness is an illusion. Science has proven everything's in motion all the time. But it's coming into stillness. Gives objects the appearance of stillness and solidity, right? It's what distinguishes solids from liquids and gases, is how quickly the molecules are moving. So our willingness to sit, to be in silence, to be still, it's the art of doing without doing. So this is a very important aspect of our creative process, and I know for people who are full of fire and air, and even water people. So if you connected with any of those elements in our workshop last week, you will probably find that there is a tendency to be in constant motion. All right, so if you're finding that this is true, know that being passive is one of the ways that we collect stuff with which to create. So think of it, right, like the way that a bowl might sit in the rain, still, and just collecting water drops and eventually filling, right? You're collecting sensory input that generally you can take and turn into your writing. But it's only through this stillness that we really dilate and that we really open ourselves, that we really are paying attention, so that we can allow for the details that we will need in our writing. Writing is abstract. We need to awaken imagery and onomatopoeia, so the sound qualities, the image qualities, the scent and flavor of the moment, right? The tactile sense in the abstract words that we're using. And so this receptivity that we find in stillness is really essential to good writing and to the creative process. Not only that, but in stillness, we enter the rest and digest state. So we get out of that fight or flight. It allows the nervous system to settle. And as we come into this state of rest and digest, our cortisol levels lower, our blood pressure lowers, our heart rate goes down, and the mind is able to wander. So you're better able to dream when you're grounded. And we'll see later that this is a quality of air, this ability to dream and to wonder and to imagine. But we're best able to do that when we're firmly anchored in our stillness. It's true in a very literal way as well, right? It's the gravity of Earth, of its mass, that holds the atmosphere in, the air atmosphere, so that we're able to breathe. So there's science. I know a lot of this looks like associated with the season of winter, because it is the season of rest, where all the plants become dormant, where the animals hibernate. So know that this is going to be true of your creative process too. And instead of kicking and thrashing and throwing a tantrum because you're not getting anything done, sit in stillness, honor a period of dormancy, and after your rest, move on to the next thing. You'll let those start to see movements as the seeds sprout in the spring, right? So as above, so below, we need the quality of Earth so that we can provide the support and structure that will allow us to grow and flourish as writers. The branches of our creative projects can only be as broad and healthy as the roots and the organization, the structure are. So we need to dig in, take some time to slow down and be still. We need to remember that even in the fallow, that is the dormant periods when we're not harvesting and creating, that even in these fallow periods, this is part of the creative process, part of allowing those root structures to form. Take the rest you need and rest completely. It's part of the creative life. So really essential to realize, yes, that's part of it. Earth deficit challenge. You need more earth if you have poor boundaries or you're not holding your ground, or you have no sense of a right to be here or to take up space. And sometimes you see this in people who they might not be eating enough, or you see them like making themselves look very small, or they're not speaking up for themselves. People who are impatient or easily bored, that's very fire or air, might need benefit from more earth. Incomplete projects need more earth, more deadlines, more specifics, more organization. If you're stressed or burnt out, nervous system needs to be grounded. If your writing is abstract rather than specific, that's showing a need for more earth. People who are disembodied, lots of times you can tell that people are kind of airy, or they're floaty, or they're not really here. This can often result from trauma. Earth element is helpful. Disorganized people, people who don't have a tribe, who aren't supported, and people whose identity or purpose is not clear in the non-writer communities. We're going to look in the next 8 weeks at how all these elements work together, how we can bring them into balance. If one of these things is you're identifying with them more, you will see, for instance, earth deficit people, you may have a lot of fire. So fire is not bad. That's your superpower. It just means that we're going to also need to balance some of that fieriness with earth. Or if you're very air, right? That's your superpower. So don't give it up. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're just trying to cultivate these other things that we may have let go because we weren't so good at them, or because we didn't connect with how they were useful to us as writers. Earth benefits: claiming space, claiming identity as a writer, physically manifesting what had it been only potential, entering the darkness to awaken imagination, stillness and silence allowing for relaxed awareness, awareness of form, awareness of rhythm, awareness of specifics, and taking time to rest and rejuvenate to connect with source. So these are all things that are helpful about the earth element. The worksheet I sent you asked you to identify these things, what you're working on, and then the amounts of time that you will spend on them. I suggest that you go ahead and fill these in. We're going to bring our workshop to a close for today, the webinar to a close. You have these worksheets. I suggest that you fill these out, that you hold yourself accountable for these. If there are any comments in the, I got one amen there. So if you have any comments you want to share here, anything in the worksheet, I'll hang out with you for another few minutes. But you'll see that just filling these blanks in is really helpful to identifying what sort of space and time you have to give to your project. So what is that project? The smallest amount of time that you could dedicate to it and feel good about it. So my own coach, Sam Bennett, she's with the Organized Artist Company. She says 15 minutes a day. And I'm like, oh, I've got 15 minutes, right? And so I'm like, oh, if I don't get 15 minutes in, maybe I get it a half an hour tomorrow. So just starting to pay attention to what habits work best for you. And everyone's going to be a little different, right? I'm so glad that you found this helpful, Stephanie. I'm glad the images resonated. They helped me a lot too. So I know most of us are going to really need to connect with this earth element. If you did not get your binder set last week, that was part of your homework, right? So get your space set aside, get a binder to start putting these things into. And I would suggest for the next 8 weeks as we move forward, that you print out maybe 8 of these sheets so that each week you can look at, because each week is going to be different. You're not going to, you may have doctor's appointments one week, and you know, maybe have other demands on your time. So you might not be able to give your projects the same kind of nurturing that you would like. Or maybe one week you're out at a poetry reading and so you're not writing that week. So that's your writer's activity, is you're going to go connect with your tribe, right? All right, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm glad you could all be here. And next week is our support call and Q&A. So if you have questions as you move forward in the week, please write them down. On the Ning forum, put up any writing that you get done. Remember that we need to connect with each other. We're our tribe for the next 8 weeks. So whatever you get written, even in its rawest form, please share it under the daily writing. There's a place there for you to collect small stones. And you'll see that there's a prompt for invocation. So if you're lacking darkness energy, maybe you'll invoke the darkness this week and create an invocation for that. Or maybe you'll create an invocation to stone so you can be strong and still and hold your ground. All right, thank you everyone for joining me this week. I will talk to you next week. Be well.